The hadith about the Quran and its relationship with the Torah and the Injil. Would it be how do we understand the Quran's relationship with these scriptures? Is it out of adab, is it appropriate to say that the Quran is more superior than these other revelations, or that rather the Quran contains the teachings of these scriptures?
The Prophet ﷺ, he didn't say "La tufaddiluni," like don't say I'm better than this prophet or that prophet, because even though the prophet he's Imam al-Mursaleen and he has a maqam, there's no benefit in it, and it's just it'll just upset other people and things like that. But the Quran is definitely, we believe, it's the final revelation. It's the only one that's preserved in the original form. There's debate about the Bible. I mean, even the Catholic Bible, the Protestant Bible, they're not the same. They differ on the books that are in it. We know that the Gospels are have different. There's 4 different Gospels. Mark is probably the earliest, then Matthew, then Luke, then John is late. John is very Hellenistic. So whatever the gospel is, the Injil is in singular in the Quran. It's not Anajil. So the 4 Gospels are not the Injil that Isa alayhi salam came with. I mean, they call it the Q Gospel, the Quell Gospel. And then the Torah, again, we don't know. There's a difference of opinion about tahrif. Is it bil mabani or ma'ani? Is it the interpretations that have changed, or is it the actual physical book? But there's definitely, there's things in the Bible that I don't think we don't accept them. The denigration of the prophets, like we don't. I mean, I was telling I had a pastor came visited the other day. And I told him, like, we don't believe that about Dawood alayhi salam. And I told him, I said, you wouldn't do that. Like, you wouldn't send, if you wanted to have a woman and you were a general in an army, you wouldn't send the husband to get killed. I said, Bob, you wouldn't do that. Like, how could a prophet of God do that? Like, just a basic, decent human being would not do that. So to say that a man of God would do that, I mean, that's just not. And we know the Davidic kingdom was divided, so there's actually, there's a belief that there was a lot of anti-Dawood propaganda at the time. I mean, this is, Dawood derangement syndrome. Like this occurs in every time, that people just hate somebody and they tell lies about them and things like that, and then they get in the books and things like that. So these are problems that we don't accept. But the Prophet said, hadithu an bani Israel, like you can relay their things. I mean, one of the modern things of getting rid of all the Israeliyat from the tradition, that was never, the ulama always understood that they were permitted. The Prophet permitted them, but he said, "La tusaddiquhum wa la tukadibuhum." Don't deny it and don't belie it unless it goes against our Aqeedah. Like if it's clearly unacceptable, then we would say that can't be true. At least the way you're understanding it, it can't be true. But the Quran is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given it a status. They're all revelation. And we know that all these different peoples had revelations. So, and the other thing which is really important for Muslims, if we can, is you have to have some portion of the Quran, like a wird of the Quran. And there's a lot of people that do awrad and then they don't do the Quran, which is just, it's backward. Because the awrad, the adhkar al-sabah wal-masa are better at that time than any other dhikr, because the Prophet did do certain dhikrs, but they're not a lot. There are a number of things that were done in the morning and the evening. But the best dhikr is the Quran. Afdal al-adhkar, al-Quran. And even, afdal al-dhikr, la ilaha illallah, the Quran, fa'alam annahu la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah is from the Quran. So the best dhikr is the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ, this is a hadith, I mean, it has some nadar, but it's, min al-fada'il. he was asked what was the best action. He said, al-hal al-murtahil. Like the hal al-murtahil. Halla yahillu fahuwa halun. You know, it's like to come to a place. So the hal al-murtahil, he was asked, ma al-hal al-murtahil. He said, an yadrab fi awal al-Quran ila akhirihi. فإذا حل ارتحل. You know, so when he finishes the Quran, he starts it again. And that's why when you do the khatam, you always, when you finish with the mu'awwidhatayn, you go to Fatiha and then the beginning of Baqarah, because that's the hal and murtahil. It's just a continuous thing. And the more you do that, the more benefit you get out of it. I mean, obviously studying the Quran is very important, and like we should think about the Quran. Tadabbur is very important, but to recite the Quran, just to recite the words, has an impact on you. And even if you're ajami, to recite the Quran and to get into that habit of reciting the Quran, there's great blessing in that, and it will have an effect on your heart. The Quran will definitely have an effect on your heart. And the Quran will reveal itself to you, you know, over time. Like you see things in the Quran. Even if you read the translations, you're going to get benefit from them. I mean, obviously you have to be careful. There's increasingly reasonable commentaries now in English. So there's some good commentaries. I mean, Yusuf Ali has some wonderful notes in there. There's a lot of really beneficial notes in Yusuf Ali's translation, which has kind of been sidelined. It was the main translation for a very long time. Now they kind of first they republished it and got rid of a lot of stuff. I mean, because he was kind of he loved English literature, so he'd quote Shakespeare or he'd quote, any other.
Sheikh, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
My daughter Asya, mashallah, from Syracuse watching right now. She asks, what is your personal favorite thing about Ramadan?
My personal favorite thing about Ramadan? I think it seems to be a time when just Muslims are happy, which is a really wonderful thing. I think there's just a kind of spirit that you see in Ramadan that you don't see other times of the year. I mean, I was really struck and, you know, really reduced to tears seeing the, you know, the people in Gaza putting up lights. Amidst all the rubble, you know, and celebrating their iftar in that communal. It was pretty stunning to see that. So may Allah give them some peace and rebuild their homes, inshallah, and protect them from any ethnic cleansing. Alhamdulillah. But yeah, I think that's probably, I mean, one of my favorite hadiths, which I think is the best answer ever that anybody who's ever been asked what your favorite meal is, when the Prophet said, الَّذِي كَثُرَتْ فِيهِ الْأَيْدِ, the one that has the most hands in. Like you could just not give a better answer. Because he wasn't looking at the food, he was looking at the communal nature of eating. Like one of the things that really struck Shaykh Khatri when he came here is that people ate alone. And Abdul Muttalib would never eat alone, and this is Jahili Arabs. But Abdul Muttalib would never eat alone, and when he was on long journeys and he was alone and he had to eat, he used to find a rock, and he would put the rock up, and then he would give a luqma to the rock, and he would talk to the rock. So, but you know, just eating together, tazawur. Imam al-Haddad, he said, al-Islam shajaratun tusqa bit-tazawur. You know, فَإِذَا انْقَطَعَ التَّزَاوُرْ يَبِسَتْ الشَّجَرَ وَتَمُوتُ. He said, the tree of Islam is, the brotherhood of Islam is like a tree that is watered with visitation. And if you stop visiting one another, the tree will dry up and die. So one of the things that happens in America is people get adamatized, you know, and they live in isolation. A nuclear family is not a family. A nuclear family is not a family. You can call it a nuclear family, but it's not. A family is aunts, uncles, cousins. That's a family. A family is a clan. And it wasn't that long, even in this country, when that was the way things were. Now it's reduced to just a mother and a father, if they're lucky. If they're lucky. But then both are working, so these kids are put into daycare centers. And these are tragedies. So I think Ramadan, for me, it's that time when people break the fast together, come together. I mean, it's a great blessing in just community. Because you need community. I mean, we can't, as a species, it will kill us. It's already having horrible effects. There's so many unhinged people, there's so many unwell people, and a lot of it has to do with they don't interact. I mean, somebody said, you know, when in 2016, it was, you know, somebody said, oh, they were so shocked that Trump, and they said, nobody I know voted for him. Because all you do is you live in your little bubble. You know, you live in your little bubble and you don't realize there's other worlds out there. There's other peoples, there's other opinions, you know, it's not just your insular worldview, and people need to get out of themselves and recognize. I mean, one of the biggest calamities, in my estimation, in the Muslim community is our inability to talk freely about things and just to be able to discuss things and have different opinions and not hate one another because you have different opinions. Because this world is not an easy place, and it's very difficult for a lot of people. There's a great deal of difficulty in life on earth and making sense of the world. And there's a lot of confusion. And young people go through, it's very difficult to be young today, and there's so much confusion. Things are breaking down, authorities breaking down, nobody trusts anything. You can't trust the science. It's hard to trust the science when science has been co-opted by corporate enterprises, and it's more about money than it is about you know, helping people. So people start losing trust, things break down, and then when things get confusing, you know, people are bewildered and ask questions. And so traditionally, the Muslims were people that had answers to a lot of the questions. But now Muslims themselves have become very confused, and the religion gets distorted, it gets hijacked, it gets impressed into things that it's really not, was never meant for. I mean, our religion is not, it doesn't have a political party. There's no political party. You know, Muslims in America can't say Islam is democratic or Republican. It's not. It's its own thing. And politics is always going to be a divisive thing, which is why traditionally ulama tended to stay out of politics, because whenever you get into politics, people get split on politics. So a lot of the ulama they didn't really have political opinions in that way. They just wanted to remind people, teach people, keep people connected with their Lord. It doesn't mean they don't, and there are ulama that do, and there are ulama that worked with governments, and there's ulama that stayed away from governments. Those were all, if you look at the history of Islam, there's no black and white. I mean, there were great, the two great students of Abu Hanifa, one of them became a qadi, and the other one was very upset. Well, he couldn't believe he became a qadi. But they had different views on, because the Prophet warned about being a qadi, but at the same time, if nobody is going to take the qada, then it's left to the worst people. If the good people don't take it, it's left to the worst people. Even in the governments, you can talk about, you know, people, you know, who work in these governments, but in the end of the day, those are the governments that the Muslims have. And if there aren't scholars there to teach the people, if it all just becomes tear it all down, then when is there going to be any peace for people? When is there going to be any teaching? Well, Who's going to run the masajid? Who's going to be the imams? Who's going to give fatwa to the people? All those things. People don't think about these things. It's, so these are all ijtihadat issues of where people decide. Even I was saying the other day, I was reading something about how Islam, you have to be in a group and you can't, yeah. The Prophet ﷺ said towards the latter days, people, if they want, they could just check out completely. That's a right of people to do that. They can just check out completely. The Prophet talked about people, مُعْتَزِلٌ بِبَادِيَتِهِ يُؤَدِّي حَقَّ اللَّهِ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِ. They just flee to the mountains and they just fulfill their own personal right with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the Prophet said the better is to stay. خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ خَالَطَ النَّاسِ وَصَبْرَ أَذَاهُم. The best of you are those who mix with people and are patient with their difficulties. Because being with people, it's not always easy. Everybody has the uncle they don't want over for the iftar, but he comes anyway because it's family, and that's just part of life, right? And maybe you don't. Maybe your family's perfect. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khairan.